Have you ever like tried to learn English?
Yeah, I mean, I know this is crazy, but yeah, English is at least as illogical as Japanese in a lot of ways. I spent many years teaching ESL, and believe me, my ESL students had more headaches from learning English than you guys are having from Japanese.
Wood.
Yeah.
Yeah, wood.
Tree.
Also tree, yes. Anybody?
Bank?
Gold. Right.
Gold, yes.
Right.
Bank actually includes this as the radical. The radical form of this is sort of shifted to the left and squished and slanted slightly. So it looks like that. And then they take and put that on the other side, and that is gin, which is silver. And then they put this, which in this case is something close to the word repository. So silver repository, bank, ginko. Hi, Eddie-san?
Those little hook things on like the horizontal lines.
These,
Are those
that is
actually?
that is a print font.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. When I write it, I write that.
Okay.
What that is coming from is, has anybody here ever worked with a calligraphy pen, a Japanese brush? You know, it's basically, it's a round brush, it's round like this, it's a cylinder, and it's got boar bristles, if it's a really traditional one, as the hair. And it comes to a nice, neat point, so it looks something like this. Forgive my drawing. Okay, and you hold it that vertically.
Yes.
And when you press down, you can control how thick the line is by how far you press. Because when you press down a little bit, you get a skinny line. When you press down more, you get a fatter line. And when you come back up again, it trails back off. What you're getting here is that these are what would be called stops, where you stop the pen and you press a little bit and then you lift. So it makes a little bit of a rounded end to the line. When you have what's called a tail, it trails off. You lift the pen gradually away from the paper as you complete the line, and that creates a tail. So there's a stop, there's a tail, and then there's a hook. And those are the three different ways that a calligraphy pen can choose to end a line. And most Japanese print fonts tend to assume a calligraphy brush style to some degree, and some of them exaggerate those stops and hooks and tails more than others. Okay, so anytime you've got this sort of triangular thingy, that's just a stop. Okay, I'll look for a place where it shows you what would be considered a hook. But these are stops. This one is, anybody? To eat. Okay. This one is the side radical for person. Yep. Side radical for water, yes. H2O. Mizu. And here is the other water kanji, yes. This is the standalone. If you're talking about omizu, like omizu o kudasai, please give me water. That's what this is. This is mizu. Okay. Oh, and here's an example of a hook. Thank you very much. That's a hook. See how it has something like a stop, but then it comes to a nice little point? That's a hook. And that's a tail. So we've got examples of a stop. This is a stop at the other end. This is a starting, because the line goes that way. So it tails off. This is a stop in the middle of a bent line into a tail. This is a stop that actually, they widen it on purpose as it finishes, and then lift. Okay, oh, so this one is soil, yep. This one is,
Other bank? Or other-
no,
other
actually,
gold?
very close, but not.
Other gold, no?
Not gold, but,
Silver?
no. See any similarities here?
Eat.
To eat, it's the side radical version of eat. It's part of words like gohan, meal, and nomu, to drink.
Woman.
Woman, right?
Ear?
Ear, yes.
Door?
Right.
Fire?
Fire, yes, the bottom radical for fire.
Mustache.
Not a mustache. This one is baby, child, yes.
Bow.
Bow, as in this kind, archery bow, not bow. It looks more like a bow, yeah.
That's what English language speaks like.
Yeah, there you go. Speaking of craziness in English, right? This one is to show, and although it looks like the combination of katakana ni and the small kanji,
You're welcome.
you could also think of it as being some sort of a pedestal or stage to put something on and show it off. It's a way to remember it anyway, if you can see that, right? Anybody?
Yes.
It's katakana ne, and it's also, believe it or not, because it doesn't look that much like it, it is the side radical version of this.
I noticed, isn't that a side radical for another one as well?
There's another side radical that looks almost like this, but is slightly different. I will put this aside so you can see the difference when we get to it. Okay, this one is
Hand.
hand side radical, and here's the regular hand, full-size hand. Okay, this one is labor, work.
Work.
Okay, and it looks like an I-beam, like for construction. Anybody? Again, or right hand?
Looks like a ship.
This one, well, it's got foot on the bottom,
Is it wall?
and it's got soil on top to run, yes. Yeah, foot on soil, running. It's just sort of upside down, I don't know,
Definitely looks like a ship.
it looks like a ship?
It does look like
Okay.
a ship, yeah.
Yeah, well, think about running the ship then, I guess.
Okay, I'm terrible, 'cause
Yeah.
I just thought that looks like the Titanic.
Okay.
Iceberg ships.
Oh, boy. Okay, what's this one? This one looks like a pretty good diagram of a kid saying what it means. It was
Pretty big.
this big, right? Doesn't it look like an outline of that shape?
Short-tailed bird.
Yes, short-tailed bird. Go figure.
That one's eye.
That's the eye, yes. Not the pronoun, but the body part.
It's got the bottom part of show.
Yeah, no, the bottom part is tiny, the top part is
Fine
also
silk.
small,
So really
small, or
small.
tiny and small, fine silk, yep, tiny and small. And that is the side radical version of that. You see them?
Fine silk.
Fine silk. And it's the radical on a number of things that aren't necessarily silk, like paper. Okay, this one is small, small, that one's small. This one,
Side radical for small.
side radical for not small, but heart. Okay, and I know they don't exactly look alike, but
Yeah,
It's a-
it's a stretch.
that's a stretch, but it is what it is.
This is why you
It's a stretched heart.
It looks like food, but with like a L at the bottom instead of like the little hook.
If you're making your food look like that, you've got a problem, because food should hook in the other direction.
I mean, kinda, not
this one is
Battle axe.
battle axe, yeah.
Horse.
Flip-flop.
Speech.
Speech, yes, speech radical. See the words coming out of their mouth?
Nice.
Knife, yes.
Other knife.
The side radical version of knife. And note that this one is made to go on this side, not the other side. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. And this is a radical on words that have to do with like discernment as well as cutting. So it's not just the physical cutting, but it's also like separating concepts. It can be an abstract kind of separation or breaking apart.
Cut to the chase.
Anybody?
Something with big.
Clothing.
Big.
It's the clothing concept, and here's that article that you were talking about.
It's got an extra line.
It's got one extra line compared to this one. See the difference?
Oh, yeah.
Tricky.
Man, no, they're not even close. I'm embarrassed.
Think lowercase a and lowercase d, and how many fits that must have given Japanese people when they first had to learn English. Right?
Strength, power.
Strength and power, yes. Tiny. Yep.
Sunset.
Sunset, yes.
Mouth.
Mouth, good. And
Enclosure.
enclosure. The only difference is size.
You lost me.
Anybody?
It looks
cowrie
like an
shell.
eye.
Yes, cowrie shell, used for decoration and commerce in ancient
Break it.
prehistoric times. And it's still in a lot of kanji that have to do with commerce. and
Rain.
trade. Rain, yes, this is rain.
Yep.
And that one is
Foot.
foot. Right. Okay.
Kiku.
Kiku means
Listen.
listen, yes. And it conjugates as kikimas, right? Kiku, kikimas. Everybody got that?
Yeah.
And to not listen would be
Kikimasen.
kikimasen. There you go.
Go.
Dedo.
Date.
Date, yes.
Like going out on a date.
Like going out, yes.
Is that little?
Shoto.
Chotto, a little bit. How many people have heard chotto natte? Chotto natte kudasai.
Those do not look little enough.
Chotto is a little bit. Small amount.
Let's make those little ones a little.
Yeah, the small yo and the small tsu are not very small in this font. Hanasu,
Speak.
speak, yes, hanashimasu. Okay, so hanasu conjugates to hanashimasu and
Hanashimasen.
hanashimasen. There you go.
Hanbanga.
Hai, hamburger.
That conjugates too.
Hopefully nothing. That's a scary
Tennis.
concept. Hi,
Tennis.
tennisu. Yes, it is exactly what you think.
Kuru.
Right, which means to come, and it's irregular, so it conjugates as
Kimas.
kimas and
Kimasen.
kimasen. And if you notice, what all of the ru verbs do is they drop the ru, right? What all of the u verbs do is they change that final consonant to e, right? And then add the mas. What suru and kuru both do is they change this consonant and vowel combination to the e and drop the ru. Isn't that interesting? So it's like they're combining the ru for ru rules for ru verbs and u verbs. Suru, shimasu. Kuru, kimasu. See what I'm talking about? Yeah, it makes it easier to remember, doesn't it? They're both doing that same pattern. They're both changing the U to E on their final consonant before the ru, and they're dropping the ru. Isn't that weird?
It's irregular, that's for sure.
Yep. Hence the term. So, furu, kimasu, kimasen. Mainichi means every day. And that nichi would become replaced by that kanji for day if we were doing that right now. Okay?
What's that?
Some of you have drunk this.
Oh, yeah. Alcohol.
Yeah, osake.
Osake.
Yeah, it means alcohol, and it also means specifically that type of rice wine that is indigenous to Japan and East Asia. Osake.
Study?
Hai. Benkyou suru changes to benkyou shimasu, exactly. And benkyou shimasen. Because remember what I said before, suru, when it comes at the end of a phrase like this, suru still conjugates the normal way, because benkyou is actually its own separate word that has suru tacked onto it to make it conjugatable, because it comes from Chinese, and Chinese verbs can't conjugate, so there was no way for them to conjugate it when it was just pure kanji. They had to add something that could conjugate. So they added suru to make it something that could be done in Japanese.
Cool.
So otherwise, benkyou by itself acts like a noun, like studies, one's studies. Okay? Asha means tomorrow. Right? Some of you have drunk this one. Right? Ocha is green tea specifically. It's Japanese tea. Yeah, ocha is the thin green tea that is sort of a daily kind of drink, not the thick neon green stuff. That's matcha.
I love matcha.
Anybody? Taipei? Usually. Okay. Konban? Tonight, yes.
Hiru gohan.
Right, hiru gohan.
Is that breakfast? Morning meal?
Almost. Hiru means noon.
Oh.
So lunch, noon meal. Right, hiru gohan.
No mood.
No mood
Means
to drink?
yes. So conjugation kanji.
Nomimasu.
Right, nomimasu and
Nomimasu.
nomimasu. By pushing this down, I can see everybody.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay, so nomimasu, nomimasu.
So that's
So desu ne. So somebody, yeah,
That's-
that's right.
That's true.
When somebody's saying something and you agree with them, so desu ne.
It's like
Ain't that the
true.
truth? Something like that.
ain't that the truth, Jake? So just ne, Jake.
Iku.
Iku means
To go.
to go, yes. So it conjugates to
Ikimasu.
and
Ikimasen.
ikimasen. Right. Terebi.
Television.
Yes.
That's the closest they could get?
Well, it's a shortened version. Because it
Alright,
used to be television. And that was too long, so they shortened it to terebi. They do that a lot. They translate our words wholesale, long form, and then over time, as it becomes a more commonly used word in Japanese, people get tired of saying 50 syllables for something that should be 5, and so they shorten it. They just chop it.
Convenience stores, konbini.
Yeah, konbini for convenience store. Departamento store became departo. Apartamento became aparto.
That's something.
Personal computer became pasokon. Make sense? And there's a like a folk rock group that was known as Dreams Come True. I don't know if they're still popular or not, but they were very popular back in the day. And Dreams Come True got shortened to Dorikamu. Yeah, so it's like code almost. If you don't know what it stands for, you have no way of guessing. But on the other hand, the same is true of American acronyms, right? If you don't know what KFC is, you don't know why people are saying they're hungry, let's go to KFC, right? If you know what it stands for, then you understand what they're talking about, right? I think in
Nothing now.
in Japanese, Kentucky Fried Chicken, I think they've shortened that one too, but I cannot think what the short form is. Makudo Narudo got shortened to Makudo.
Right on.
Okay, so lots of
Oh, would KFC, would it be Kenta?
Kenta? Well,
Yeah.
that's a boy's name, but it's possible.
Oh, I've seen
No, I
an,
think it might be Kentucky.
I've seen an anime where there's like a statue of Colonel Sanders and the girl keeps calling it Kenta, so.
It's possible.
He's not even Kentucky Fried Chicken though. He's Sanders.
Yeah. Well, in
But
Japan.
he's the mascot, so.
Yeah, in Japan, Colonel Sanders looks Japanese too, so. Hi, do desu ka is asking, how about or how is it? So like if you put an object with it, sushi wa do desu ka could be either how about sushi, you know, sushi wa do desu ka,
Or how is the sushi?
You're teaching us how to hit on Japanese?
it could be either how about sushi, like you're suggesting, let's go have sushi, or you could say sushi wa do desu ka for like somebody's eating their dinner and they've only eaten one piece of their sushi so far, and
How
you're
do you
worried
like
that
it?
they might not like it. So sushi wa do desu ka? Is the sushi okay? So it can be either one of those. Amari with a negative. Not often, it's more like rarely. Okay, so amari shimasen. I don't do it very often, I rarely do
Can
that.
you put a pin in those, and maybe we'll go over that?
Yes,
Appreciate it.
okay. This one is
There you
eiga. Anybody?
go.
Give you a hint, though. When I was getting 3 of them.
Movie.
Yes, eiga is a movie. Nichi-yobi.
I couldn't tell if that was a small one.
This uses
Yeah, you look at
that
the
sun
top, doesn't measure
kanji
up here.
twice. Nichi and bi are both written with that sun kanji. Can you guess what this means?
Sunday.
Sunday, exactly. It's literally Sunday. Nichi-yobi. The yo that comes in the middle is one of the kanji that uses that infamous short-tailed bird, among other things. And it's just a day of the week marker. And so all the days of the week end in yobi, and they have different first kanji for each of the 7. So they're all 3 kanji compound words. Okay, speaking of kanji, let's practice.
6. Roku.
Goku, right?
It's gonna be 9 o'clock.
Right? And how do you
Fuji.
pronounce it?
Fuji.
Right, Fuji.
Juji.
Fuji, right? 10 o'clock, right? Everybody knows what
San.
these mean, right?
The Nana.
Or,
Shichi.
right?
Yaku. Nana.
CGG.
Shichiji, thank you. They don't say Nanaji, they always say Shichiji.
Shut us down.
Hapyaku.
Habyaku.
Hapyaku.
Hapyaku.
Hapyaku. Thanks.
Yakuman.
Hi, Yakuman. Everybody remembers how much that is, right?
Yakuman.
Yeah.
That's a million.
1 million.
はい。
Goji. Goji.
5時。
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
はい。
Sun.
Sanyaku.
はい。
Ichi. Hashi.
Juman.
Juman, which means
100,000.
100,000. Yaku.
600。
Ichi.
はい。
Hachi.
はい。
Ni.
はい。
Asen.
はい。8000。はい。
Sun.
3時。はい。
Q.
9。はい。
100
100
円。
円。はい。little coin。100円。
Gold.
はい。
Yoji.
Yoji, yes. Yoji.
4.
4 or she. はい。
Sanzen.
3000。はい。
6.
はい。
10.
はい。
7.
はい。
Ichiman.
1万。 Okay. More vocab.
Neru.
Neru. To do what? Sleep. And it conjugates as
Nemasen.
nemasen because it's a
Ryu.
river. Right.
Gakko.
Gakko. Anybody? Where are we right now? School. Yes. Gakko is
Like
school.
Yakusei.
Like gakusei. Very good.
Ongaku.
The
Oh,
gakko part, if you, this gak is the same kanji as the gaku and gakusei. So the ko part is a separate kanji and the sei is a separate kanji, but the gak and the gaku are the same kanji. And it gets pronounced differently when it's in front of another K sound than it does when it's in front of some other letter.
Ongaku.
Okay?
Ungoku. Music.
Ongaku, music, right. Zen, zen. So for example, zen, zen, nomimasen would be,
Oh,
I
never
don't
do
drink
that?
it at all. Yeah, never. Okay, so we'll talk about that when we talk about amari, because they go together.
Suru.
Yeah, means,
To do.
yes, to do, and you conjugate it as
Shimasu.
shimas and shimasen. Right.
Bangohan.
Bangohan, right? Ban means evening. Think konbanwa. Remember that? So
Dinner.
bangohan is
Dinner.
dinner, evening meal.
Kohi.
Kohi,
Coffee.
coffee. Yeah, and you might be wondering why they didn't use fee spelling since that exists now. Didn't exist when coffee first made it to Japan. That's why.
Toki doki.
Hi,
Sometimes.
hi, sometimes.
Kyo.
Kyo is today, right?
Itsu.
Itsu,
Itsu.
when, okay, itsu is when.
Yoku.
Yoku.
Is often. Okay?
E.
E,
Good.
good, yes.
Asa.
Asa,
Tomorrow?
no.
Tonight?
Oh, it's morning.
Tonight?
Morning, asa is morning. Remember asa gohan was
Breakfast.
breakfast, so asa is morning.
Kairu.
Going.
To go.
Return.
Return where? Home, yes. Kairu is specifically returning to a place where you live,
Okay.
okay? It is not used for going back to a place you visited before, even if it's someplace you visit all the time, like school. You don't live here, your bed is not here, you don't pay your
Should
rent
hope
here,
not.
right? So you don't kairu toward your school, you kairu when you're going to your home. If you're in Japan, you could say America ni kaerimasu. If you're in New York, you could say Florida ni kaerimasu. If you're in Tallahassee, you could say Brevard County ni kaerimasu. If you're in, say, Titusville, and you live in Melbourne, you could say Melbourne ni kaerimasu. If you're at school and you're headed to your own house, you could say uchi ni kaerimasu. Okay? So,
What's
you
the
know,
what's the ni part?
ni is the particle that we're going to learn about. Okay? So remember we've talked about grammar particles a little bit. We've got wa. Ni is one that can be used for direction of movement
Okay.
to talk about the place to which you are traveling. Okay? So kairu, kairimasu, kairimasen. Doyobi. Remember what I said yobi was? Day of the week. So doyobi is Saturday, right? And this one is written with that soil kanji, which we talked about. Zashi.
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 Zashi. Any ideas? Zashi.
Magazine.
Magazine, right?
That's in our homework. We did that one.
What do what?
Jumatsu.
Shu, matsu. Shu is another word for week. Matsu is the end.
Weekend.
So weekend, exactly.
Ay, ay.
Aye,
Early.
aye.
Hey,
Early. Aye.
Uchi.
Uchi. Yeah, uchi is? Anybody?
we need to work on our vocabulary.
Yeah.
I was-
Yeah,
I was
you
thinking
just
home.
said that.
Yeah.
I was thinking home, but
You know, I didn't hear you say it, so. What do what?
Asa gohan, breakfast.
Yay! What do what?
demo. But
Demo, but.
But
What do what?
yomu.
Yomu.
To read.
To read, yes. And it conjugates to
yomimasu.
yomimasu.
Yomimasen.
Yomimasen.
So
Right?
now I don't want to drink from you.
Yeah.
House.
Drink with me.
This one's read, not drink. The other one is nomimasu. That's read.
Nomimasu.
Nomimasu is drink, yomimasu is read.
No, I want to read.
Okay? Ie is
House.
house. Right?
I was thinking of that when you said home.
Yeah. My bun is every night. My, as in my nichi, and my ban. They're
Every
both
day.
every something. My nichi every day, my ban every night.
Okay.
Okay? It's the same nichi that's in nichiobi for Sunday, and it's the same ban that's in ban gohan and konbanwa for evening.
To eat.
Taberu, to eat, and conjugation,
Tamemasu.
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 Tadamasen. Hey. What do what?
Mizu.
Mizu, that
Water.
kanji we had, water, hey,
Drinking water, not like rivers.
right.
Otsu.
Sports,
Sports.
I
Miru.
do to look, see, or watch. They don't distinguish between those three necessarily. And it conjugates to
Mimasu.
mimasu,
Mimasen.
right? Mimasen, right?
Aisukurimu.
I heard you
Yes.
saying it.
Right?
I heard you say it. It's on your
Goro.
slowly.
Goro, about, approximate. Usually used on time, like shichiji goro, around 7 o'clock.
So you put that after the actual time, similar to
Yes.
Han?
Shichiji han goro,
Okiru.
Gotcha.
yeah, 7:30 approximately.
Okiru.
Akiru.
To get up.
Okiru is to wake up, yes, and it conjugates as okimas. Okimasen, that is an O, not an A. Okimas. Okimasen, right? Okay, so kanji, we talked about a little bit, so let's look at sentence structure, yes. We finally get to do stuff with verbs. Okay, you ready to talk about verbs?
Let's talk about words.
Okay, so, let's see.
about meat potatoes?
Okay, well, before we get into talking about verbs in sentences, let's first take a little bit of time to talk about conjugating verbs. So we're going to conjugate one more time, just the ones that are in this exercise, okay? So, taberu conjugates to,
Share what
like,
Tabemas. Yeah.
let's see, I think I can get this to zoom a little bit.
You're not gonna do that.
In case somebody doesn't have their textbook handy.
There we go.
Let's see.
Let's put it over there.
Let's see, there's probably an autofocus feature somewhere. There it is.
That's good enough.
Is that good? I can't see from here, so.
Good.
Okay, so, taberu changes to tabemasu, tabemasen, right? Michael-san, 1番お願いします。
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Nomimasu.
So Michael's saying this one, so, nomimasu,
Nomimasen.
nomimasen. 2番,
Would be surumasu and surumasen?
no.
Or no? Wait. Well, I'm looking at the old. Sorry, I'm going across. Sorry. Kiku, which was kikimasu and kikimasen.
Hi, that's the one.
Miru would be mirusan.
Miru is what kind of verb?
Verb.
Ru verb,
Oh,
so
so-
mimas and mimasen. There you go.
Okay.
Okay, miru, mimas, mimasen. Let's say all three so that everybody can hear. So, nomu, nomimasu, nomimasen. Kiku, kikimasu, kikimasen. Miru, mimasu, mimasen. Right? 4番.
Shimasu, shimasen.
はい、する、します、しません. I want you to memorize the dictionary form with the must form so that you can convert back and forth between them easily. We've talked about the rules, right? So you can figure it out if you have to, but if you can memorize them so it comes to you more quickly, that's even better. Think about math. When you were learning multiplication tables in elementary school, you probably thought it was horribly boring to have to memorize them, right? But if you had to take out your Lego blocks or something and count out 8 tens every time you needed to know how much 8 times 10 was, that would have been crazy, right? You don't want to have to figure out the answer every time. You want to be able to know some of this stuff quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Conjugating verbs in Japanese is in that kind of category. Yes, there are rules you can learn to help you learn it, but at some point you want to have it just right there on the tip of your tongue so you can say it when you need it. Because if you have to sit there and figure out, okay, what kind of verb is it? What's the rule for that verb? How do I apply that rule? Your friend that you're trying to talk to is going to give up and walk away by then, right? So you want to have it like right there that you can just say the word you said that you need, right?
You know what? Never mind.
Yeah. Okay, so suru changes to shimasu, shimasen. じゃあ5番.
Hanasu, hanashimasu, hanashimasen.
はい。行きます。はい。行く、行きます、行きません. I want you to say all three. Okay? 行く、行きます、行きません. はい。じゃあ7番.
来る、来ます、来ません。
はい。来る、来ます、来ません。はい。ゆうじさん。帰ります。帰りません. This is one of the ones that, although it ends in ru, it's in disguise. It's really an over. Okay? It's trying to trick you. Okay? So don't let it win.
That is the only ru verb in our vocabulary for this chapter that isn't a ru verb.
Okay. Yes.
That helps everybody.
Yeah.
Learn that one.
Professor?
Yep. If you put it in this,
It's the only one.
it is the only one in this chapter. Okay? So for now, the only verb that you have to worry about not being recognizable as definitely a new verb at first glance is kairu. Okay? We've got other ru verbs, right? Okiru, taberu, neru, and miru. And we've got kuru suru and benkyou suru in the irregular category, right? But kairu is the only one they're introducing this chapter that's an u verb that ends with ru. Okay, so kairu, kairimasu, kairimasen. いいですね。じゃあ9番。
見えます。見ません。
はい。ジュリーさん。はい。
起きます。起きません。
はい。And 10番、12番、マイケルさん。
勉強する。
する Yeah. So changes to
勉強します。
はい。And
勉強しません。
はい。勉強しません。はい。いいですか Okay, now we're going to learn how to use direct objects. Remember we talked about the fact that particle o is a particle that marks a direct object. What time is it?
It is 4 o'clock for 20 minutes.
Okay. We'll have time to get through a little bit of this. Okay, so, okay,いいですか? So we're looking here. Look at the example. Okay. Koji-san, you want to read the example for us?
So, zashi
Hi.
would become zashi o yomimasu.
Hi.
Yomimasu.
Zashi o yomimasu. Okay, so notice the structure here. The direct object, then the o, and then the verb that applies to that object. Make sense? So it's the object before the verb, and the object marker goes in between the two.
Just same as when we did wa and des.
Yes,
We're just doing it with other stuff.
right.
Got it.
But, well, wa is a little different because it's marking the subject, and then there's usually something else after it before the des, right?
Uh-huh.
So this is a slightly different structure. Okay, so you're doing direct object, o, verb. Okay? じゃあ1番、ジェイコブさん。
音楽を読みます or would it be
What verb would you use for listening to music? 音楽を What's listen?
Isn't it kiku? Okay, so the 音楽を wasn't
So kiku is your
Oh, okay, yeah,
dictionary
okay, so
form.
it's
So how do you
on-
conjugate that?
gaki, right?
音楽を聞きます。Okay?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
音楽を聞きます。Okay? Because remember in the example, what was zashi again? What's that mean? What's zashi? Magazine, right? So zashi o yomimasu, what's that saying? Someone reads magazines.
You haven't specified who,
They're not specifying who at this point. We're gonna worry about adding a subject later.
just we're basically saying reads magazine.
Someone reads magazines,
Right.
okay? Now,
Okay.
someone listens to music. Note that if you already know who it is you're discussing, you don't have to have a subject. This is a complete sentence just like this,
Gotcha.
okay? So, zashi o yomimasu. With no other context involved, it would probably mean I read magazines. If you're using the context of the pictures here, we've got Mary-san in all our pictures, so it could mean Mary reads magazines. Same thing with ongaku o kikimasu. If you really want to, you could say Mary-san wa ongaku o kikimasu. That's how that would fit together if you want to put it in. Okay? what verb applies to tennis?
No.
Ah, does anybody know what verb applies to tennis? Any guesses?
Do
To
tennis?
To do tennis, yes. You do tennis in Japanese. All of the sports, games, etc. take the verb to do in Japanese.
So it's like,
Not to play.
what do you do after school? Tennis.
Yeah. Okay, so
So
you're just saying someone does tennis.
テニスをします。
はい、そうです。Okay, 3番, you get to eat a hamburger.
ハンバーガーを食べます。
はい、食べます。ハンバーガーを食べます。じゃあ、ブラッドリーさん。
コーヒーを飲みます。
はい、コーヒーを飲みます。いいですね。ジョシュアさん。
テレビ
テレビ。
を見る
So, 見る, what's it change to? So,
見る見ます
yes, 見ます。So, テレビを見ます。Okay, テレビを見ます。
テレビを見ます
はい、いいですね。じゃあ、レンジさん。
Lindsay's gone.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Katie's on.
You said go. You said go.
I so much, yeah. Talking to a
Son,
ghost.
but she's not returning.
No, she told me she had to leave early
To
today.
go.
So, what's she doing over here?
Lindsay,
Nihongo
son,
日本語を
を、
見ます。
日本語を話します。
はい、日本語を話します。Okay? Any questions so far? Okay? You'll note that we haven't used all of the information yet. They're going to let us build up to that gradually. We're going to build our more complex sentence one little piece at a time
I like that.
so that you can get comfortable with this simple level of sentence first before we add another element. Okay? So, you ready to add one more element?
Yup.
Okay, so part B of this exercise says to add the place to the following sentences. So, when you are adding a location at which an action is happening, the particle to use there is de. Okay? Please note that this is for action verbs. Okay? It is not when someone is just existing in a place. It's not for when you're going to a place. It's only for when you're discussing an activity that will happen at that place. Does that make sense? Right.
Could you just like write on the board, like
Sure.
underline, like maybe like
Like diagram
like-
something?
yeah, let's diagram this. Like place, what particle it should be,
Right,
direct object, particle, verb.
right.
So just kind of like
Okay, so let's use,
yes, that's
okay, so let's use, okay, let's use zashi o yomimasu, okay? So, zashi o yomimasu. Okay, so you've got your verb here, right? You've got your object marker, right? You've got your direct object, right? If you want to add the element of place, that she's going to do this at the library, because that's,
Toshokan de.
yes. So, toshokan de. Okay, so place de. This de is like at. Okay? And what you'll notice is that aside from the subject, which if we wanted to add a subject, we could say Mary-san wa, right? So we can do person, and then the subject marker. Sometimes they call this a topic marker, whichever you want to call it for now. Mary-san wa toshokan de zashi o yomimasu. Okay, so let's write this almost like a formula. Okay, so it's going to be person wa place de object o verb. Okay? And also notice, if you're translating this into English, Mary, there's your subject, right? Reads magazines at the library. What do you notice from here forward?
It's reversed.
It's exactly reversed, isn't it?
Mary's at the library with magazines and she's reading them.
Uh-huh.
That's how it
Yeah.
Well, Mary, the library is at.
Yeah. So if you look at it from that direction, okay, everything after the particle wa in Japanese is in the reverse order of English. 90% of the time this works. You isolate your subject, get that down on paper first, and then work from the period backwards for the rest of the sentence. 99% of the time that's going to work for you. And on the occasions when it doesn't work exactly, it'll still be really close. Okay? So regardless of whether you're going from Japanese to English or English to Japanese, this is the rule of thumb that I always teach people. Isolate your subject, get that down first, because that's actually first in both languages most of the time, when it exists in Japanese, right? Sometimes it's just not there. It's just assumed that you know who they're talking about, so they don't bother to mention it again, right? So that's the equivalent in English of using a pronoun, right? If we already know that we're talking about Mary, we switch to she did this and she did that and she did the other thing, right? Japanese just drops it entirely. They don't bother with a pronoun. Okay, that's the difference. But everything else, work it in reverse order, right? Mary-san wa toshokan de zashi o yomimasu. It works in both directions. You see that? Now, if you're working from English into Japanese, you also have to pay attention to, well, this one has a particle that's an equivalent. Oh, there's no particle in English, right? So you just have to remember, oh, yikes, it's a direct object, it needs O. Okay? But it is kind of them to at least make the object marker an O sound. O for object, right? That helps.
So that particle is going to change based on the object, not the verb.
That particle is going to always be O if it's a verb that can actually directly act on the object.
Can you give me an example of something where the verb wouldn't act on an object?
I go to the library.
Okay.
I'm traveling to it, I'm not acting on it. You
Okay.
see? The magazine is getting read, right? The library is something I'm traveling toward. I'm not doing something to it, I'm just traveling toward it.
Okay.
You see the difference?
Maybe you use ni there instead of de if you're going to somewhere.
Right. So when you're traveling to a place, it's a completely different structure. I'll put it over here.
You get another ni.
Yes. There are multiple meanings for ni. Okay,
Almost as bad as san.
Yeah. I sometimes make the joke that Japanese is kind of like a caterpillar. It's got lots of knees. Because there are a zillion uses for knee, unfortunately. And only one of them is usually written in kanji, the number. The particle ni is usually just hiragana. Okay, so let's say we're going to the library instead of doing something at the library. So toshokan ni ikimasu. Okay? So, and again, if you wanted to add Mary in here, Mary-san wa toshokan ni ikimasu. So this would be Mary goes or will go
So if it's not,
to the library.
so if it's not a direct object, you don't need a marker for it.
You need this.
Yeah.
You don't need O.
Yeah.
Because it's a different function.
Mhm.
Okay? So this is more like 2,
Mhm.
right? This ni is like 2. She's going to the library. Now what's interesting, sometimes a little tricky, is ni is not your only option here. There's one other option, which is e. Remember we talked about that he had an alternate pronunciation, but we weren't going to deal with it yet? Here it is,
We're dealing
particle
with
e. We're dealing with it now. Okay, so you've got the option to say toshokan e ikimasu or toshokan ni ikimasu. They are interchangeable as long as the thing you're going to is an actual place. If you're going to an event like a concert, it needs ni. Okay, it only takes e if it's a physical location. So the way I compare it is you can say King Center e ikimasu. Okay, going to the King Center, right? But konsato ni ikimasu. Because the concert might be being held at the King Center, but if something happened and they needed to change the venue, that same concert could happen elsewhere, right?
The location is irrelevant in the sentence. It's
Right.
the event, regardless
Right.
of where it is.
Right, so if it's an event that you're talking about, like konsato, then you need ni to go to the concert. If you're going to a place like the King Center, you have the choice, ni or e. A lot of people, especially at this level, choose to just use ni all the time so they don't have to worry about it. That's fine as long as you recognize e when you hear it used. Okay?
Okay.
You can be passive in your comprehension of e for now if you prefer. Eventually, when you have heard it in context enough times, you'll get to a point where it doesn't scare you anymore and you'll be able to use it in exchange with ni in appropriate contexts because you'll have heard it in context often enough to get comfortable with it. Make sense? Okay? So this is the differentiation that's really important, is between place ni and a traveling verb, to go, to come, to return, versus place de and some kind of action verb like eat, drink, speak, read, etc. Okay, do you see the difference between those two classes of verbs? So I make a distinct, definition difference between traveling verbs, where you're actually moving from one place to another, and verbs that are not traveling verbs, where you're doing an action, but it's not about getting from one place to another, it's about doing something in the location where you are. You see the difference there? Because if you're reading a book, your imagination might be traveling, but your butt's sitting in the chair, right? If you're eating your dinner, you could walk around the kitchen table in circles if you really want to, but you're basically staying in one spot to eat, right? Okay, so do you see the difference between the two? Okay, so that distinction is very important because you need a different particle for those two different kinds of verbs. Okay? And by the way, the o travels with its object. You cannot put an o with toshokan because you're not reading the library, right? You're reading at the library. So if you want to leave out the part about the magazine, you can leave out the part about the magazine, but you have to leave out the o along with it. Okay? If you want to leave out the part about where you're doing your action, you can leave that part out, but you have to leave out the de as well. If you want to leave out the person who's doing it, you can leave that person out, but you have to leave out the wa along with it. Each of these nouns stays attached to its particle for the purposes of forming a correct sentence. If you want to leave out a part because you feel like it's already understood, make sure you're also dropping the particle that would have gone with it.
So could I just say Toshokan de yomimasu?
Yeah, sure.
I'm just reading at the library.
I'm reading in the library. Toshokan de yomimasu. You don't have to specify what you're reading. Maybe you're reading 5 different things, a book, a magazine, and
Sure.
3 cards,
I can say Mary's reading in the library, Mary's reading magazines, we don't know where she's reading.
Right.
Someone's reading magazines in the library.
Yeah,
Somebody's at the reading at the
so all
library.
these pieces that I put boxes around are all interchangeable. Sometimes people play with the order to put a different emphasis on the sentence. You can take these boxes and shift them, make them trade places.
You can,
You can. Yes.
and that won't be marked off.
It's rare to see this box further forward in the
Okay.
sentence. Subjects are almost always at the beginning, but you know what? Time words are always closer to the beginning also. If you're going to have a time phrase in this sentence, it can go either here or here. Okay? And we'll talk more about that next time because I think we might be out of time, speaking of time.
So I can see Mary's reading
Ivan
magazines
Angeles,
at the library.
421.
Okay, yeah.
Sure, St. Mary's
Okay.
library.
So if you've got other questions, you can ask me after class or you can save them for next class.